how Europe can respond to the challenges it faces, and how Europe can emerge stronger, more united, better prepared to the uncertainties of tomorrow. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome to the stage His Excellency Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania, for the opening remark.
Of the European Central Bank, member of the European Commission, ministers, central bank governors, distinguished guests of the conference. Every Euro adoption story is unique. Naturally, I like the Lithuanian one the most. The introduction of the Euro has transformed Lithuania's economic, social, and welfare landscape, benefiting business and society. Over the last decade, the common currency has become a firm part of our European identity. Perhaps most importantly, the Euro now protects us against global financial turmoil. While the crisis of 2009, before the adoption of the common currency, resulted in insignificant drop of our economy, by 2020, we were much better prepared, shielded by the euro area and able to rely on the counter-cyclical fiscal policy. Lithuania managed to escape the pandemic crisis with no GDP contraction. And now we demonstrate the strongest performance in the whole region. In the last 23 years, Lithuania's GDP per capita grew from below 40% to close to 90% of the European Union average. And in the last 10 years, the decade of the euro, income convergence only accelerated. We saw many sectors moving forward at an accelerated pace, including advanced and innovative manufacturing and services, lasers, biotechnologies, information technologies, military technologies, and sustainable food production. This year, we mark 20 years of the European Union membership and the 10th anniversary of Euro in Lithuania. On this occasion, calling Lithuania a true success story would be no exaggeration. And I strongly believe that success stories make Europe stronger. The way I see it, the Lithuanian example underscores the euro's general resilience and credibility. In these turbulent times, nothing is more important than being stable and trustworthy. Stable currency makes not only economic but also social sense. It protects vulnerable people and makes their living easier. In most cases, we can say that the economy functions best when there is price stability. A strong economy also contributes to a strong currency. Dear Madam Lagarde, I would like to commend the European Central Bank for its efforts to keep the common currency stable, which in turn provides a solid foundation for our common market. Right now, we have a firm foundation for building Europe's future prosperity. The real question is whether we will be able to take additional steps. Europe urgently needs to be more competitive. Our internal market needs more freedom and less barriers. Mr. Letta and Mr. Draghi clearly state all this in their comprehensive reports. Nonetheless, we must also acknowledge that the question of Europe's competitiveness does not exist in a vacuum. The changing geopolitical and geo-economic environment constantly shapes and transforms our reality, and we cannot afford to ignore it. In the foreseeable future, we will have to speak more about raw materials, new technologies, and innovation gaps. We will have to find adequate responses to the hostile actions of the third countries. We will have to move closer to a savings and investment union, as well as a common EU debt, especially in defense. Strengthening the European defense industry will be the key in the current geopolitical situation. To be secure and to help Ukraine more in its fight for freedom, we will have to create missing capabilities and invest heavily in the critical areas such as air and missile defense systems and ammunition. Finally, to increase the competitiveness of the European Union and to strengthen our economy along with the common currency, we will have to agree on concrete tasks with clear deadlines. We must clearly mark our way forward so as not to get lost in the wilderness. We must also work towards further enlargement of the euro area, which is a natural and beneficial process. While we are busy making improvements, we must stay open and innovative. Our goal should be enhancement of the strategic economy of European payments and monetary sovereignty. One good example for this could be ambitious project of the digital euro as a supplement to cash payments. But we need more to fully harness and explore the technological age with its many opportunities. I hope that today's discussion will contribute to a greater understanding of the euro area's issues and future perspectives. I wish our esteemed guests the most fruitful conversations and a pleasant time here in Vilnius, even under terrible weather conditions. Thank you, and thank you to all participants of this important event. Thank you.
Then that's the message for everyone to heatedly participate in the debate and discussions later on. But now I'd like to invite to the stage Gediminas Šimkus, the chairman of the board of the Lithuanian Bank, for the welcoming.
Ekscelencija Lietuvos Respublikos prezidentė Gitanai Nausėda, gerbiamasis finansų ministrė, gerbimieji Seimo nariai, vyriausybės atstovai, garbūs svečiai, ponios ir ponai. Nuoširdžiai sveikinu visus susirinkusius į Lietuvos banko ekonomikos konferenciją. Ir renginys neeilinis, jis skirtas euro mūsų bendrosios valiutos 10-mečiui Lietuvoje paminėti. Renginys tarptautinis, todėl dabar pereisiu prie anglų kalbos. Dear President of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, dear Member of the European Commission, Valdis Dombrovskis, governors, ambassadors, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to this historic venue. We are at the Palace of Grand Dukes of Lithuania. And since the early days of the Grand Duchy, a predecessor of the modern Lithuania, the palace has stood as a geopolitical and economic center. The occasion that gathers us today is very special. 10 years ago, Lithuania joined the euro, which is also both an economic and geopolitical landmark. Therefore, The topic of today's conference, Pillars of Resilience Aimed at Global Geopolitical Shifts, is not accidental. It's an invitation to reflect on the most pressing challenges to Lithuanian and European economies. And most importantly, how we can overcome them. The euro accession does not happen overnight, and as Lithuania's experience proved, by trying once. Economic and legal criteria are rigorous, making the accession a demanding journey. And during this journey, both actions and words matter. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you, Christine, for your support and consistent vision on the Euro area membership. Then you visited Lithuania 2013, back then, in your capacity as the managing director of EMF. Dear Christine, that's the tricky part. Merci cordialement. Besides being demanding, Lithuania's journey was also collective. The adoption of a common currency is beyond the capacity of a single institution, and I would like to extend my gratitude to everyone. Your bright minds and strong will made it possible. Thank you. And congratulations to all Lithuanian people and all of us here on this 10-year jubilee. I see the Euro membership as one of the cornerstones, a part of Lithuania's strategic and decisive Euro-Atlantic integration since the 90s. Lithuania is an old country whose name was first officially mentioned more than 1,000 years ago. And despite a relatively early appearance on the European map, Lithuania's political and economic development has not been continuous. And of the past 200 years, our country was independent and sovereign for less than 60. Accession to the European Union, NATO, Schengen area are landmark events. They show that solidifying and deepening Lithuania's ties with the Euro-Atlantic friends has been consistent. The accession to the Euro area was part of our steady goal to increase economic and geopolitical resilience. Esteemed guests, the Euro was one of the best economic decisions over the last 30 years. It has brought tangible benefits, economic benefits to the people. 10 years ago, at the Euro doorstep, Lithuania's economy had to be and was well balanced. And the Euro now further strengthens it. The Euro contributed to the trade expansion. Financial stability was enhanced by eliminating currency mismatches and broadening liquidity management tools. The Euro reduces downside risks to our economy. That is most evident in crisis situations. During the COVID-19 pandemic, despite an almost complete shutdown of economic activity, huge uncertainty about the future, international markets were lending to Lithuania at low interest rates. And this not only helped to prevent economic contraction, it also stands in stark contrast to GDP loss that we experienced at the depth of a global financial crisis. Lithuania strengthened its geopolitical resilience and economic stability with the adoption of euro. By introducing the euro, Lithuania demonstrated that the European project is attractive and its objectives of economic stability and geopolitical cohesion continue to hold appeal. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years anniversary of euro in Lithuania offers a chance to look into the future and to steer it by making wishes. So what do I wish for our common currency? Jean Monnet said, continue. There's no future for the people of Europe other than in union. I would add that our single currency would indefinitely continue providing benefits for the people. And here in Lithuania, we are on a good trajectory. My second wish is that we not only continue to stay together, but also further deepen our integration improving single market modus operandi, increasing growth and productivity, and enhancing institutional capacities. And these are not just economic matters, certainly not in the context of Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine. I am sure that today we'll have a lot to say about these and other pillars of resilience. So I stop here and once again, congratulate all of us on the 10th anniversary of the Euro in Lithuania. Thank you. Ačiū.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now it is my great pleasure and honor to invite for the keynote speech, President of European Central Bank, Madame Christine Lagarde.
Thank you so much. Monsieur le Président du Conseil, Monsieur le Commissaire, Mesdames et Messieurs, Mesdames peut-être pas, mais Messieurs, Messieurs les gouverneurs actuels ou anciens, Messieurs les membres des conseils divers et variés, Monsieur le Président du Conseil de la Banque nationale de Lituanie, and now I switch to English. But it was also my way of showing my huge respect for those in the audience, and in particular to my host, Monsieur le Président, and to you, Gediminas. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for hosting this conference. It's a true honor to be here. And although you gave me a slight reminder of what I looked like 10 years ago, which was a lot better than what it is today, but at least, as some writers have said, I survived. And you have more than survived, you have thrived. So, laisvė, vienybė, gerovė. To those who don't applaud because they don't know what I said, it was freedom, unity, and well-being. And these are core national values of Lithuania. And accordingly, they are engraved on the edge of your €2 coin. Freedom, because of the liberation from Soviet occupation. Monsieur le Président, you reminded me of this March for Peace that brought together more than 2 million people. Unity, because of the need for national solidarity, and well-being, expressing hope for economic and social prosperity, which, Gediminas, you have beautifully showed us through the charts. These three words capture the spirit of the Lithuanian people. And I believe that being part of the euro has actually strengthened those values. Let me briefly say in which way. The country is now an equal partner in setting monetary policy for one of the world's most important central banks, rather than having effectively to import the monetary policy of whoever are the large neighbors. And that gives the country the freedom in charting its own macroeconomic destiny that smaller economies cannot otherwise typically claim. Lithuania also now issues the world's second most important reserve and invoicing currency. That provides unity in the face of a more volatile world, as foreign shocks do not penetrate the domestic economy as much, owing to domestic currency invoicing. It was clearly the symbol of your umbrella that shielded members of the euro area. Lithuania is especially resilient on this front, invoicing no less than 78% of its exports to non-member countries in euro terms last year. This is the fourth highest share across the European Union. And being part of the euro has increased the well-being of the Lithuanian people. In 2015, when Lithuania joined the euro area, GDP per capita in purchasing power standard terms was around 70% of the euro area average. By 2023, it exceeded 83%. But most recently, Lithuania has dealt with very high inflation, peaking at 22.5% in September 2022, which is more than double the peak seen in the euro area as a whole. And this high inflation episode has led to a pronounced monetary policy cycle. The ECB raising rates by 450 basis points, holding them steady for 9 months, and then cutting back by 100 basis points since last June, as we entered what we called the dialing back phase. So hiking, holding, dialing back. So what I would like to do today is explain what motivated this change and what it implies for the future. In a nutshell, we have seen the environment change in 3 important ways that increase our confidence that inflation is indeed returning to our target. These changes concern the path of inflation, the shocks driving inflation, and the risks to inflation. So path, shocks, risks. I'll deal with the path first. In the earlier part of our monetary policy cycle, the path of inflation was characterized by high uncertainty, and we consistently saw the return of inflation to target in our projections being pushed back. At the same time, the incoming inflation data were surprising on the upside, casting further doubt on the accuracy of those projections. ECB staff models using machine learning indicates that in 2022 and 2023, uncertainty around inflation forecast was around 4 to 5 times higher than in the long-term average. And this uncertainty about the inflation path had implications for the policy horizon, and that is the period within which we want to see inflation converging to target, the horizon. Normally, what we call the medium-term policy horizon is flexible and can be extended depending on the nature, the size, and the persistence of the shocks. But if there is a risk of inflation expectations being de-anchored, the horizon must be shortened. Shortened to the nearest possible date that monetary policy can take effect to prevent that risk from materializing, which, given normal transmission lag, is around 2 years' time. With inflation rising and its return to target continually being pushed back, at a certain point, we did consider that the risk of de-anchoring had become too high. So, in September 2022, we introduced the notion that the return of inflation to our target had to be timely. Timely was the key word. Now, our aim was to fix the policy horizon and thereby build confidence among the public that there would be no more delays. We had to be timely. Now, after a lengthy period of restrictive policy, our confidence that we are seeing a timely return to target has definitely increased. Since September last year, we have had 6 consecutive forecast rounds showing inflation returning to target in the course of 2025. And this arrival date has stayed constant even as we have drawn closer to it. The uncertainty around these projections has decreased significantly. Again, our machine learning models now put the uncertainty bands, remember it was 4 to 5 times higher, we are now close to pre-pandemic levels. The incoming data have over time validated the path laid out by our forecast. Since early 2023, the accuracy of staff projections has returned to the level of the pre-COVID times, especially for headline inflation. While errors for core inflation have taken longer to materialize and to normalize, this year we have also seen a return to historical standards. And this confidence is confirmed in inflation expectations. Remember, that's what triggered this timely. Among households, median expectations for inflation 3 years ahead are close to 2%. And market-based indicators of longer-term inflation expectations have also fallen in recent months. So that's for the path. Let's look at the shocks. The major challenge facing monetary policy during this cycle is that we have faced not one shock, we have faced a sequence of large shocks, which, given staggered wave and price setting in the euro area, have transmitted through the economy in persistent and hard to forecast way. So even as our confidence in our projection increased, we had to be careful in making our policy stance less restrictive too quickly. We needed a policy framework that would allow us to better understand this complex inflation process. And that is why we built our reaction function around our well-known 3 criteria: inflation outlook, the dynamics of underlying inflation, and the strength of monetary transmission. Focusing on underlying inflation allowed us to extract more robustly the trend in inflation based on the data we could see in front of us, complementing the information provided by our forecast. And for a given inflation path, assessing the strength of monetary transmission allowed us to judge whether our tightening impulse was being passed on through the transmission chain and thus was effective in steering inflation back to 2%. This forward-looking framework has provided a way of broadening our information set to capture the pace at which a very large past shock, don't forget, here 22.5% at peak, in the whole of Europe, 10.6% at peak as well, was running its course, and how our monetary policy stance was transmitting through the economy and affecting medium-term inflation. For some time, the signals from underlying inflation were still flagging the risk that inflation might not decline as quickly as indicated in our forecasts. But recently, that risk has declined, and there is now greater alignment between our forecast and underlying inflation. The width of the range of measures of underlying inflation that we monitor has narrowed towards its historical average. Most indicators are now hovering between 2 and 2.8%. And then we take that as an indicator of receding uncertainty on future inflation dynamics. The PCCI, the persistent and common component of inflation, which has the best predictive power for future inflation, has remained at around 2% since the end of last year. Is it all perfect? No, there is still one measure that is clearly above range, and that is domestic inflation, which captures items with a low import content. But this year, year-on-year measures that is made of 97% of services item, it is still registering repricing events that took place earlier this year. We tend to call them the late comers. And that is still keeping inflation at around 4%. Not all inflation, service inflation. But if we look at PCCI for services, which strips out base effects, the measure currently stands at 2.5%, We also look at the momentum, and inflation momentum for services has also dropped steeply recently. These data suggest that there is scope for a downward adjustment in services inflation and thereby domestic inflation in the coming months. Confirming this picture, wage growth, which is the main cost factor driving services, is on a downward trajectory and continues to be buffered by negative growth in unit profits, buffering the pass-through of rising wages to prices. We need to be very attentive to that set of indicators. But the ECB's wage tracker, which captures wage agreements in more than in 7 euro area countries, representing around 85% of total wages in the euro area, sees wage growth slowing from 4.8% currently in 2024 to around 3% in 2025, which is a level that is generally considered to be consistent with our target of 2%. So we've discussed the path, we've discussed the shocks and how we address them, and we now need to look at the risks to inflation. And that is the third change that we are witnessing. The fact that past shocks were expected to travel slowly through the pricing chain meant that in recent years, the risks to inflation were mostly to the upside. And despite the progress we have seen in underlying inflation, these risks have not entirely disappeared. The composition of inflation remains unbalanced, with the recent slowdown being driven mostly by industrial goods, but even more importantly, by energy inflation, which is particularly volatile. The adjustment process for slower moving services inflation is still unfinished. So we will have to remain watchful until the downward adjustment in services inflation that we expect is actually confirmed by data. However, as past shocks fade, the risks to the inflation outlook have changed. And crucially, these risks are now more related to potential future shocks than the transmission of past ones. The main downside risks relate to the weaker than expected growth outlook and the increased uncertainty surrounding growth triggered by geopolitical developments. For some time now, we have been seeing small sequential downward revisions to the growth outlook, which have accumulated over the course of time. And if we look back at our June 23 projections, it has accumulated significantly from 1.8% expected growth in 24 back in June 23. Now we expect 0.7% in 24. And one driver of this delayed recovery has been sluggish export growth, driven by the competitive challenges facing euro area companies. But the most important driver of our growth forecast misses has been the domestic economy. In fact, around 1/2 of the misses since end 21 relate to investment and 1/4 to consumption. The behavior of investment can be attributed to a stronger than expected impact of higher interest rate and certainly higher energy prices, together with the structural challenges facing some industries. The inertia in consumption has been striking given that the conditions for a recovery are in place. Employment is historically high and real income are rising. But yet, households continue to save an unusually high share of their income and take a very cautious approach to spending. Why is that? Well, one reason for this caution is that many households have a perception of their real income growth that is well below measured data. only 37% of households in our consumer survey believe that their real income has risen or stayed the same, even though 50% of households have experienced actual increases. And these households have significantly lower consumption growth than those with the correct perception. So there is a dichotomy there. The pessimism about real income is largely driven by past inflation. And so in principle, it should dissipate as the high inflation episode moves further into the rear mirror. We are out of the water. Well, geopolitical uncertainty could create new dents in household sentiment. Let's hope that is not the case. Which are those risks? Well, if the United States, for instance, takes a protectionist turn, growth in the euro area is likely to take a hit, as the United States is our largest export market. Our exporters also specialize in capital goods that other countries use for export production, which makes them particularly sensitive to shifts in confidence about the world trade. The main upside risk we see in the future also relate to external shocks. A rise in geopolitical tensions could push energy prices and freight costs higher in the near term, while extreme weather events could drive up food prices. The trade fragmentation and the tariff net effect on inflation remains uncertain, especially as estimating the effect of protectionism involves an assumption that are impossible to anticipate with real precision. These include potential retaliatory actions, exchange rate, and commodity price movements. So, what does this changing environment, which I have just gone through, paths, shocks, and risks, what does it mean for monetary policy? There are three main implications. The first implication concerns our current policy stance and its future orientation. The current policy stance is restrictive. But if the incoming data continue to confirm our baseline, the direction of travel is clear, and we expect to lower interest rate further. The direction of travel is clear, and we expect to lower interest rates further. In terms of the future orientation, we previously said that we will keep policy sufficiently restrictive for as long as necessary. That bias was necessary in an environment of high realized inflation and high uncertainty about the future of inflation. But it no longer reflects the evolving macroeconomic landscape, our outlook for inflation, or the balance of risk around it. With the disinflation process well on track and downside risks to growth, this bias in our communication is no longer warranted. These considerations are reflected in the monetary policy statement adopted by the Governing Council last week. I know some of you follow it carefully, not all. We no longer aim for, and I quote, sufficiently restrictive, that was the coded language, but rather we intend to deliver an appropriate policy stance. Big difference. The second implication for monetary policy concerns our reaction function. The high inflation period has proven the value of the three criteria we have been using to take decisions, which is why the Governing Council confirmed our policy framework at our meeting last week. And these criteria will be invaluable in the period ahead, even as the risk to inflation move from past shocks to future shocks. In an uncertain environment, we will need to continue complementing our baseline outlook with a rich distribution of possible risks derived from current data. But our framework that I have just described with the 3 criteria. That framework is flexible in the sense that we can change the weight that we put on different legs of our reaction function depending on the nature of the shocks we are facing. For example, if we face large geopolitical shocks that significantly increase uncertainty about the inflation projections, we will need to draw on other sources of data to make the risk assessment surrounding our baseline outlook more robust. At the same time, the purpose of monitoring underlying inflation is to help us differentiate noise in the inflation data from underlying trends. So if underlying trends are not affected, it will help increase confidence in our baseline projection. And assessing monetary transmission will continue to be important, as geopolitical uncertainty may affect monetary transmission by altering the risk appetite of investors, borrowers, and financial intermediaries. The third and final implication concerns the policy horizon. Even though we are not there yet, we are close. We are close to achieving our target. So we are no longer in a situation where we need to fix the policy horizon at the shortest possible transmission lag. We can return to a situation where the policy horizon can adjust depending on the nature, size, and persistence of the shock as needed. This change explains why we have removed the notion of, I quote, timeliness from our monetary policy statement, focusing instead on achieving sustainable inflation convergence. And it puts us in the best position to react to future shocks. So I hope the picture is a little clearer for those who are wondering what this change of language meant last week and what we are looking for in the near future. By way of conclusion, I would like to refer to a Lithuanian poem, Metai, The Seasons, written by Kristijonas Donelaitis, who charts the cyclical nature of the rural life of Lithuanians. The ECB is also moving through its monetary policy cycle, and we are now at the stage where the darkest days of winter, never mind the winter today, or lack of it, but the darkest days of winter look to be behind us, and we can start to look forward instead. We certainly hope that days ahead will be better, but winds are blowing in different directions, and there is still much uncertainty before us. So the European central banks stand ready, and our monetary policy will be prepared for all seasons and all scenarios to come. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, pour le discours très profond, mais aussi très éducatif, et pour le message très optimiste à la fin. But now I'd like to turn to the English language, and I'd like to invite you to the first high-level session, which is called a very pivotal moment, a changing geopolitical landscape, and a lot of challenges, as Madam President already defined them. It's geopolitical fragmentation, it's technological transformation, it's economical volatility, and these pressures challenge not our productivity and competitiveness, but also the very foundations of Europe, unity and stability. And in this session, we have several leading voices in Europe to discuss these risks and challenges and to come up with the solutions how to navigate through these challenges, how to bolster Europeans' resilience, how to sustain its growth, and how to safeguard its unity and welfare in the very uncertain times that we are facing. And now it is my great pleasure and honor to invite to the stage the moderator of the session, Mr. Stefan Ingves, who is a former president of the Central Bank of Sweden and is currently heading the Toronto Center. And I would like also to introduce the panel. You already met Madam Christine Lagarde, who is president of European Central Bank, but she was the first woman to serve as a Minister of Finance of France and was also the managing director of International Monetary Fund. Madam Christine Lagarde, please, welcome to the stage. You can use that way as well. Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis, Commissioner for Economy and Productivity, Implementation and Simplification. I think that this is one of the most experienced members of the Commission, who is serving already 4th term in the Commission and started his job 3rd in 2014. So I exaggerated a bit to too much optimism. And last but not least, I welcome to the stage newly appointed Minister of Finance, Mr. Rimantas Šadžius, who also served as a Minister of Finance when Lithuania was accepted to Eurozone. So I give the floor to the moderator now.
Ready?
Do you have a microphone? Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
I do think we are ready to go. Well, first of all, on my side, governors and other participants here, it's an honor for me to moderate this panel, and also given that I was part of the process when it came to actually introducing the euro in this country and what happened before that, I really think you should treasure this day of celebration because it's a huge success, and that's worthwhile being mindful of. Now, there are, of course, many things that one could talk about today when we're talking about economic and political resilience in a difficult environment when there's a lot of geopolitical shifts close to us and also in other parts of the world. And we have the Letta report. We'll hear more about that later. We have the Draghi report. We have the Niinistö report. We have many more and other reports, commissions, and initiatives. We have arguments about completing or not completing the banking union, the capital markets union, and preparing for this panel, I read the political guidelines for the next European Commission. And the way these documents go, it's a 30-page wish list. And the hard part is, of course, to get these things done. There's also another interesting report, which was a topic which was briefly touched on by the president earlier, and that is called Sailing on the High Seas, Reforming and Enlarging the EU for the 21st Century. And that's also truly an issue that matters and will matter a lot going forward. So basically, in this panel, we can't discuss all these things, but a few of them. And in terms of introducing the panel, I was sort of thinking about how to do that without actually listing all the things that the very well-known individuals on the panels have done. So let me summarize it in the following way. In front of you, you have individuals who have between 75 to 100 years of policy experience, if you add things up, in many different positions. I'm not talking about age, I'm talking about you have done, which is completely different. And of course, with all that experience in the room, there's plenty of opportunity to raise the issues that are most important as of today. And to do so, we have about 45 minutes, and then we'll take some questions from the audience as well. And I'll turn to the president of the ECB first and ask you, where would you like to start when you have a choice here between many issues to talk about? What is it that matters? And I take it that we have listened to your views and the ECB views on monetary policy, so it's not really focused on monetary policy. That would be repeating what we just heard.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. It's great being monitored by you, for whom I have huge respect. Actually, I would say something that Gediminas said earlier today in a short press conference as a prelude to what I want to say. He said, when asked, that the best thing we can do as central bank is to procure price stability. And once that is done, then it's obviously for economic actors to make up their mind as to whether they want to invest, they want to consume, they want to create jobs. But our own job is price stability, and that's the mandate we have. And we do the best we can to procure that. You asked me where I would like to start. I would like to start in Lithuania. Now, why do I say that? Because I think that in many respects, Lithuania is at the forefront of the euro area in what we should do going forward. And I would associate with Lithuania being at the forefront, and that nobody else should take offense of that, because I'm sure there are other countries, including in the Baltic area, that are doing something similar. But I would associate the Lithuania path with the concept of focus. So, as you rightly said, Stephen, we have wonderful, valuable and rich reports. One of the authors is with us in the room, and we will hear from him, Enrico Letta. Another report was the one by Mario Draghi. Another one was Christian Noyer when it comes to capital market union, for instance. But what is remarkable with what Lithuania has done is the focus it has applied to where are its assets, where are its benefits, where can it draw where others cannot. And if you look at the growth of the ITC sector, for instance, if you look at the number of startups, if you look at how financing has been channeled to those startup companies and how this sector has grown relative to the average growth of the rest of the euro area, it is just remarkable. And I'm not flattering here, although it's tempting, but it's a fact that Lithuania has moved forward. I mean, the charts that Gediminas has showed earlier on are mind-boggling. But I think it's caused by the focus that the authorities in successive political various coalitions or composition have actually applied to developing the economy and to focusing on the assets. Now, I don't know enough about the Lithuanian economy to understand whether the barriers, the deterrents to creating value, to setting up business, to financing business have been removed far and further enough. But the results are quite staggering. And I think that that focus, we should apply it to the euro area developments, to Europe more broadly, to make sure that we focus on the most feasible targets that deliver the biggest bang for the buck. Those who know me appreciate that I focus actively on capital market union, because I believe that money has to flow far more quickly and efficiently within the European Union. Sweden has been a case in point where money is actually entering, prospering and exiting the economy. We have to do a better job at that. There are fortresses, barriers, obstacles along the way, but we have to just understand that time is of the essence, and if we don't take the medicine ourselves, there will be no external doctor to fix it.
So thank you for that. No external doctor to fix it. Let me move on to Commissioner Dombrovskis with that as a starting point. What are your views when it comes to what has happened in this part of the world, and from your perspective, the benefits? And it's not over yet. So who's next when it comes to, let's say, the euro or maybe joining the EU?
Well, thank you for those questions, Honorable Mr. Governor, Madam President, Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here to celebrate 10 years of Euro in Lithuania. I remember I was here in January 2014 when Lithuania was actually celebrating Euro accession, and now looking back on those 10 years, indeed, one can see that Lithuania has thrived with euro. If you look at all key economic parameters, the development has been very successful in terms of economic convergence, GDP per capita reaching 86% of EU average, in terms of increase of export as a share of the economy, in terms of increase of FDI as a share of economy, savings, interest rate savings, and it's also resulting also on substantial popular support for euro. So congratulations on a very successful first 10 years and all the success in a next decade and beyond. So turning to the question, maybe who is next for euro area. Well, as things stand now, the country which is seriously preparing for euro area accession is Bulgaria. Chances are that within next few months it will be actually meeting all the Maastricht criteria which can set this process in motion, and we are in a very intensive engagement with Bulgarian authorities in this regard. So that's why I'd say something which is now emerging most concretely on a next potential member. Well, for the next members of the EU, that's obviously more difficult to say, but what one can say is that the enlargement is seriously back on the EU agenda. Maybe it was not the case some 5 years ago. Somehow this process was lingering, but not really moving forward. Now with geopolitical shifts we are facing, that has changed. So I'd expect some of the Western Balkan countries, which had been negotiating their accession already for more than a decade, maybe the first ones, but we have also launched accession negotiations with Ukraine, Moldova. So it's clear that EU is going to enlarge, and correspondingly we will also need to think what reforms it requires within the EU, whether it requires treaty change, whether we can adjust how we operate across different policy areas. Some of the topics which come in mind, for example, is a principle of unanimity in areas like budget or foreign affairs, which already now with 27 members is very difficult, and if EU would be 30 plus members, it probably would be even more difficult. So while it's clear that EU should be open to the enlargement and welcoming new members, we also need to look on the functioning and organization of the EU, how to actually successfully function as a larger organization. Thank you.
And then over to Minister Zadzius, and my apologies for my pronunciation. You have only had a few days actually to get used to your new position. But on the other hand, it's not completely new to you because you have been a minister before and have had struggled with various things in the past as well. From your perspective, then, what is highest on your agenda in this context, except that enjoying today and celebrating 10 years of the euro?
Well, Stefan, I really enjoy today this celebration, this anniversary, because this is my third term as a Minister of Finance. The first came after our unsuccessful application to the Eurozone. So I had to learn the lessons there. The second already was a success. Joining the Eurozone, I'm really very happy that, Stefan, you are one of the most talented central bankers I've ever met in the world. But you belong to the Corona zone. And I'm very happy that in this Euro celebration we have you moderating this discussion. There were several people as well who contributed a lot to the Euro accession. And I would name one then Prime Minister Butkevičius. Another is sitting, Vitas Vasiliauskas, who now works for the IMF. You exchanged with Christine your jobs of a kind, who not only guided this process, but also had personal costs. It was 1st of January 2015 that we were standing at the cash machine here at the center of Vilnius, and we got the first 10 euros banknotes from that machine from our own personal accounts. And I thought, okay, I will give this as a souvenir to my children, but it never was. It was taken immediately to the museum of the Lithuanian, the central bank. This is the happy part. There are other things, the lessons that we really learned. And one of the questions I was putting to myself was always why in Lithuania in 2014 and starting with 2015, the support for Euro was so high. It was an exceptional voting, for example, for the Euro adoption law in the Lithuanian parliament. It was 100 something in favor, and I think one abstention only. And I think one of the background ideas at that time, and especially now, was security. Not purely economic interests, but security. You can imagine now Lithuania is in the fortress made of 3 walls, very important walls. One is NATO, another is European Union, single market, and the third is Eurozone. And I think we have to use these walls properly. Now coming to the nitty-gritty of the Euro project. Integration of the single market that Prime Minister Letta is writing about very in detail, but also Mario Draghi mentioned, and CMU project that Christine Lagarde mentioned. These are projects that are not very fast in the European Union. Let's be frank, they are not so successful. Single market is still fragmented, and Prime Minister Letta noted that in financial area, in energy, in IT, in information area, there are still barriers. There are barriers, not only legal barriers, but also psychological barriers. We somehow should try to remove them. Now, what is the method? The method that we were proposing when I was working for the European Court of Auditors in our famous report on the Capital Markets Union project that was not very happily met at the Commission at the time. I'm very sorry about this, but it was really a controversy. One of the ideas was, I will put it in a simple way, in simple analogy. A big house, big strong house, should be built from small bricks. And here, small bricks they are important small BRICS. I recall 2007 when there was a discussion about joining Malta and Cyprus joining the European Union. I witnessed the question from journalists to the commissioner at that time, a very respectable, very good person that I honor still today. Do you see some risks? Oh no, he said. These are two small islands. It didn't take very long for one of the islands to become one of the biggest problems for the European Union. So islands, not only islands, small BRICS are very important. So they should be considered clearly, very carefully. Now, building from the small BRICS, this is, by the way, what Lithuania is doing now. We're building capital markets, well, united capital market with Baltic states. In a very difficult parallel legislation of, say, securitization laws. It is difficult, but we started from this step, from building some small element that could be then integrated into the European Union capital market. And this capital market still is very diverse. So it is quite shallow here, very deep in Sweden or in the Netherlands. So we should somehow work. So a recommendation, I still stick to that recommendation of the Court of Auditors, was to start from small regions and build further. Probably I will stop here. I will wait for reactions.
Let's continue discussing the Capital Markets Union, and the reflection of mine before we move on is that I have touched on the issue of the Capital Markets Union in many informal and formal meetings in Europe over the years, and it was very hard to sell the concept, and you could see people's eyes glaze over thinking about coffee when you start talking about the Capital Markets Union. How do we change that? And what is it that we need to do to get it higher on the agenda and actually deliver something, not just talk about it in very general terms? So that's one set of issues. Another set of issues is what to focus on, because you can't do everything and things take time. At one end of the spectrum, we have risk capital, we have the equity market. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have the difficult issue of, at the global level, the need for a European risk-free asset. And then we have everything in between. Now, Christine, in your view, what to do?
It's tentative and it's one of the many proposals, but we try to be as concrete as possible. One is, if we move ahead, it will be difficult. So why bother? We just stay as we are, with over 200 trading venues, with over 20 CSDs. Let's keep it that way. Everybody's comfortable at home. The only problem, though, is that we need to mobilize more than 800 billion euros per year if we want to be realistic and if we want to deliver on our commitment under the Paris Agreement, if we want to protect ourselves from a security point of view, and if we want to move to the digital age. So if we don't want to do that, if we don't want to be mindful of our environment and fight climate change, if we don't want to look after ourselves from a security point of view, and if we don't want to move consistently together in the digital age, well, let's sit back and do nothing. It's okay, less trouble. But if we are serious about this massive investment, then we need to follow the money. And what do I mean by that? We must be able to offer those who save today, and we have a massive savings in Europe in particular, not only in Europe, but massive in Europe, 15.7% of households' income is actually saved. But where is it saved? It's saved in cash. It is saved in bank deposit. That's probably not the most efficient way to put your money to work. So I would start with that. If you follow the money and if you know that you need to invest, Start with an instrument in which Europeans are reasonably comfortable investing in. Take some risk, yes, and that might require a little bit of a DNA change because we tend to be probably more risk averse than other advanced economies, households, and investors. But make sure that this is a European instrument that is solid and that will help mobilize money to where it should be invested. I would start with that. The second direction I would take is make sure that money can move around. And that goes straight into the direction of the Letta report. Remove the barriers. We have so much of it. In goods, if I believe the IMF report that was beautifully prepared recently, the equivalent in goods of internal barriers is 45% tariff. Okay, that's bad. In services, it's 110% tariff. That's even worse. So, in order to expand geographically where this money can be invested, we have to look at those barriers and those hurdles that we have inflicted upon ourselves. And the third direction that I would take as well is make sure that that money that is invested in this European instrument that can move around is actually heading in the right direction. And in that respect, you know, I'm not enough of an expert in venture capital and the venture capitalist approach to risks, but that's where the money has to flow, among other things. So you're right. It's good to have a European risk-free asset, fine, but we need to take risk. We don't have the luxury of time.
Thank you. Valdis.
Oh, sorry, I want to
sure.
add one thing. I also think, I'm fascinated by the Baltic experience. So whatever you learn from that sort of combined trading venues in the whole of the Baltic countries, I think will be a rich experiment going forward. I believe that there has to be unity of supervision. Whatever you call it, wherever this instance is located, however you structure it with the national implementation, but we need to have a single supervision when it comes to markets.
Well, this is on your to-do list. So now let's hear what you are up to and what you will be up to make this happen, what we just heard about.
Yeah, well, if we discuss capital markets union, well, first of all, I would say it is actually high on the political agenda of the EU. It's discussed extensively among finance ministers, for example. Several times it was discussed also at leaders level. So I would say the political momentum and political willingness to move forward is there. There are also quite a few things which have been done already. We had 2 capital markets union action plans, which are by and large implemented. So lots of kind of legislative basis is already there. However, it's not really so far transforming in what we want to see in terms of output, like a larger share of capital markets in financing European economy. So many things are not done yet, but we are somehow still not at this critical mass, which will make this major shift. So we need to keep pressing ahead and obviously looking beyond the scope of capital markets or financial markets itself, looking also at some adjunct areas like insolvency frameworks, like certain taxation frameworks. And we know that so far it has proven that that's where things tend to get difficult. But as Rimantas Saģis was mentioning, this experience of creating the pan-Baltic capital market, which is a good initiative, which also European Commission is supporting quite a lot. It also requires some legislative alignment across member states, and it's not trivial even among 3 small and very like-minded countries like the 3 Baltic states. Imagine doing it at EU 27 level. It becomes much more complicated, but if we want to make those next steps, we'll have to look at all of those issues. And on Stefan's question, how to make this conversation more interesting, also for conversations over coffee. I think some of the answers were already given, and right now we are talking also more of savings and investment union, kind of describing better the essence of what we are trying to achieve, that Europeans are great savers, and there are large amounts of savings, but they are idling on bank accounts, or the best in government bonds, and we need to put those savings to investments, to finance European economy, to finance European companies, to facilitate our economic growth. And what we see in other advanced economies over the long term, the tendency is very clear that in terms of returns of investment, capital markets are actually outperforming the bank deposits or government bonds. Of course, there are risks, there are up and downs, and all kind of things are happening. So it requires also certain financial literacy and certain safeguards, say, for unsophisticated retail investors. But over the long term, there is also lots to gain, both for the economy and for the savers. Thank you.
Rimantas, in the next upcoming ministerial meeting, then, when it comes to discussing these things, what agenda will you push when it comes to the capital markets union?
It's difficult, Stefan. When it comes to the meetings of ministers of finance, you immediately understand that, yes, our house is made of bricks, but some bricks are very small, and some others, well, are very, very big, and it's very difficult to move them. And this is one of the problems. This is one of the problems, that sometimes one or two big countries simply block the further discussion. I think deposit insurance scheme, European deposit insurance scheme, is a very good example, where this blockage already continues for many years. During Lithuanian presidency in 2013, we managed to build the second pillar. The first was done by Irish presidency. The second, the pillar of the banking union, was done in 2013. And no move. So more than 10 years already, because of inability of people to somehow to understand that even if you are very big, your domestic concerns probably should be somehow adapted to the interest of the union as a whole. This is one of the problems. Now, I would also mention another big obstacle, to say concretely in this case, for the capital markets or saving and investments union. And this is something that could not be overcome by discussions of the ministers of finance. This is psychology. It is, it is a real fact that attitude of people to savings and investing these savings somewhere differs very much between the Eastern Europe and Western Europe. This can be illustrated by very hot political discussions around the second pillar of the pension reform, of the pensions. Here in Lithuania, it was one of the hot topics on the election campaign. And probably the discussion, if somebody from the Netherlands could read it, translate it into Dutch, would never understand. So, but we somehow should overcome these barriers, and this is a cultural problem. And this communication between different countries, an exchange of experience would be, I think, should be one of big parts of this financial education of people, raising their financial literacy, about which we are talking so much. So these are two issues that I think we should keep in mind. I don't have a silver bullet.
It strikes me, yeah,
Do
sure.
you mind if I,
Sure.
because I want to bounce back from your comment. First of all, I think that for the house to be solid, there are no small and large bricks. All bricks matter, number one. Number two, it could well be that what you call small bricks are the ones that are a larger obstacle than what you call large bricks. So that's why I think the work that you're doing in the Baltics, and I wouldn't call the Baltics small bricks by any stretch of the imagination, because if you are going to move in that direction and if you can show the way, then it means that it can be done, because you also have obstacles to overcome. You also have prerogatives and local authorities and people who are going to sit on their rights and privileges. If you manage that, you're setting the tone, and you'll be able to convince. So I will be following that super carefully. But no small or large bricks, and small bricks can be much bigger obstacle than large bricks.
Well, so much about the bricks, and a kind of a reflection on this is that small or large doesn't really matter, but when those who are against eventually move, you should never say, "I told you so." You should only say, "Oh, what a bright idea. I will support you." That takes care of part of the psychology in terms of how you actually run these things. But we do have some challenges here when it comes to this. And then back to you, Valdis. You mentioned a few things, but if I'm pushing a little bit on this over the next couple of years, then could you mention one or two things that you really want to get done when it comes to the Capital Markets Union?
On Capital Markets Union, maybe to mention some concrete things and initiatives. Well, it has been discussed among finance ministers. I think it's certain directions of travel are clear. So first one I would mention is securitization, to give, so to say, another attempt on this. Securitization was part of our first Capital Markets Union action plan, but what come out of legislative process did not really land us where we ought to be for securitization to really pick up, and that's important element of Capital Markets Union from the aspects that it allows to develop capital market instruments through those securities. But on the other hand, it also helps to free bank balance sheets to continue lending to the real economy. So there is double benefit from this. So certainly we can do better in Europe in terms of securitization. Then I certainly will mention larger retail capital markets participation. It's something which we really need and which requires both the right legislative framework, but also financial literacy and, in a sense, promotion, because while in US it's natural to invest in capital markets also for retail investors, in EU it's not an obvious thing to do. So it also requires certain promotion, information, and it requires some patience, because as we discussed, it also has some risks involved. But then we, as I was saying before, we need to move this conversation beyond, strictly speaking, just financial markets, also to some other areas like in insolvencies and taxation, because there are also obstacles, including debt equity bias, for example, in taxation, and inconsistencies in different frameworks, which are hindering emergence of truly European capital markets and even truly European banking system and cross-border provision of financial services. So if we want a capital markets union and even fully functioning banking union, we also need to address these, and those are also on our agenda.
Let me continue with you, Valdis, and then the other ones can also jump in and comment, and changing the subject a bit. In this region, we have various both political and economic challenges when it comes to what is going on in Ukraine. And we also will hear more about that in the next session. Our dear friends from Ukraine are present. But on that side, it will require quite an effort on the side of Europe as a whole for probably a number of years. And it's not just Europe as such. We also have the G7 and others who are involved in this. What do you see happening on that side?
Well, on financing side, I would say things are broadly on track. So from the European Union. So first we have our Ukraine facility, which is 50 billion euros for the years 2024 to 2027. And we are on track with implementation of Ukraine facility. By the end of the year, we intend to disburse another 4.1 billion euros to Ukraine, bringing the total disbursements this year to 16.1 billion euros. On top of this, we now have the G7 $50 billion loan program, so extraordinary revenue acceleration loans, where I would say the new feature of this program is that it's financed from the revenue streams coming from immobilized Russian assets, so making Russia to directly pay for damage it is creating in Ukraine. So EU is participating in this program by 18.1 billion euros macro-financial assistance program, and all the decisions are already taken. And it was important to take those decisions this year because we have empowerment which expires at the end of this year, which allows us to do it now. And US have also done their side. They have their contribution is $20 billion, and bulk of this money is already transferred or being transferred now to the World Bank, where it then can be used further for Ukraine support. And all this, I would say, goes a long way towards covering Ukraine financing needs for at least next year, but also beyond this, because those are medium-term instruments. So on this financial support, I would say things are broadly on track. Where we need to step up the support, and which is critical right now, is military support, military equipment, ammunition, because that is what is lacking right now, and which is very much needed now because the war is in very intensive phase. Russia is pushing, and that's where we need to step up as a EU and as a collective democratic world. Thank you.
Limantas, any comments
I
on
would
this?
add another aspect of this well, sad circumstance that we live aside the war. There is not only need to finance Ukraine, but there is a huge load of financing needs in different member states. And here, what I can see, it is very asymmetrical. There are borderline member states, Baltic states, other states, Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, where this load probably is bigger. Just if you wish to liberate, in the theoretical case of assault, if you wish to liberate in a sufficiently short time the territory of Lithuania after the assault, theoretically you need means, money, resources that are absolutely disproportionate considering the Lithuania's economy size. And now I come again to this analogy with a house. In this house, we should have a very strong door, and the strong door is should be used by all the inhabitants of the house, and everybody should care about that. One of the examples when we were assaulted by a virus was RRF, Recovery Resilience Facility, financed by the loans taken by the European Commission as a sovereign distributor of the bonds. So this model it is not yet finished. The success, I hope it will be successful, but still quite a lot of work to do. I strongly believe that there are big European resources also needed for the defense financing defense of all the member states, which means that frontline states probably they will have to get quite a lot. This a perfect analogy with the external border of the European Union, which is financed by the European budget. But of course, it doesn't require such big forces. There is an agency, Frontex, which is taking care, financed by the European budget as well. Resources are incomparable, of course, defense and then just supervising the border. But for defense, this is a real problem, which otherwise started destroying the public finances of these small member states. So this is another idea that I think, of course, the leaders should first decide on, like it was with the RRF fund. But Lithuania is pushing now for that idea. I don't know how Christine sees this idea.
Christine, you deal with the money, but money is fungible, so you can buy all sorts of things for money. But do you have any quick comments on this? Certainly, it's an issue which will be with us for many years to come. And
given that our friend has mentioned the RRF, I would just simply make 2 points in relation to fiscal. One is this RRF, which, you know, highly praised, decided laboriously, but eventually fast-tracked after that. It needs to be delivered and it needs to be completed. And there are countries which are facing difficulty in actually absorbing this funding and making sure that it's put to the right use. So, number one. Number two, there is now a fiscal governance framework that is in place and that also needs to be respected and to inspire the confidence that is needed for investors to locate their investments in this part of the world. And it's a fiscal governance framework that has been specially designed to accommodate for, number one, you know, healthy public finances, as well as investing in growth enhancing projects and potential growth enhancing projects. And I think that, you know, yes, of course, we need to move forward. We need to reform, very much needed. But I think we also have frameworks and principles in place that we need to abide by.
So now I think we need to move on, and we'll take some questions from the audience. Please state who you are. There's got to be microphones around here, and to whom you want to pose your question. So who would like to start?
I'm tempted to give you the answer that is, of course, practical and yet extremely difficult, which is now being discussed seriously, which is the 28th member state, which is to consider for either, I mean, currently the discussion is active on this 28th member state, and Enrico Letta has awakened it in many ways, but it's out there. And some people see it for SMEs, other people see it for large corporates that could opt in. But I think the idea is to have a jurisdiction that is fictional in many ways, of which the legal regime, the tax regime, the solvency regime, in its basic components is not fictional. And that could be where those interested in having this at least embryonic capital market union framework can opt for. But you're right, the negotiations will be complicated internally. They will be complicated with partners as well. But we should really find the practical solutions that can move the needle. Once we start moving the needle, I think that there will be a momentum.
Well, I would add from my side this question of development of regional capital markets, or we're discussing this Baltic capital market, but in a sense, if we are scaling up capital markets, at least at the regional level, we are creating, coming to this topic, to building bricks, we are creating a larger building bricks and fewer of them. And this will also simplify then the next step, so to moving indeed to truly pan-European capital markets. So also development of those regional initiatives is a step towards this European capital markets.
I agree with Valdis and Christine in this case.
Okay, good. Now let's see.
No, I think this idea of the 28th member state, it was born just for insolvency regime at first, and for bank insolvency, it is already there, I think, almost there, likewise. But this could be an option. And by the way, new Lithuanian government has in its program review of the corporate law in Lithuania. And I think during that review, we will try also to get things done and adapting to whatever regime. I would like, of course, the regime proposed by the Commission for the 28th regime. Probably we would be the first or second or third to join it.
I mean, it's my job to moderate, but I just can't hold back when it comes to commenting a bit.
As you should.
A lot of this is about plumbing. And that means that you have to have large numbers of plumbers in the same room. But national plumbers are not trained to agree with other plumbers. So they need political guidance, where the political system has to tell them that you are not allowed to leave this room or these tables until you have an agreement on the table. Then things will happen. And then the technical stuff will sort of follow after that. Now let's see, more questions.
Can I
Yeah, sure.
violently agree with you? Because I was finance minister for 4 years in my country, and you are totally right. Finance ministers are not necessarily plumbers, but they are advised by plumbers. So if the determination comes from the top at the leaders level, then the plumbers should all be locked in a room and the key should be taken away until they come out.
No, that's how it works, because when you're a plumber, you are paid to make sure that nothing happens if you are against. And then somebody else has to order you to agree to something that you probably yourself find deeply illogical and do not like, because all of us carry a backpack with our domestic stuff.
And there is a good proof, 2013 single resolution mechanism. It was just in one room, by the way, before midnight. we struck a compromise before midnight, which is completely against the European rules, but nevertheless, I'm joking.
Now let's see, I have a hard time seeing because I have the lights in my face. They're over there.
Celebrate 10th anniversary of Euro adoption, and that 10 years were quite good for Lithuania, very good performance. So I would ask maybe Christine Lagarde, what can European Union and Eurozone learn from Lithuania?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, because you take me back to my first response to Stefan's question. I think what all Euro area members can learn is, number one, that you have to focus. You have to be prepared to take some risks. You have to play the collective game. And I think that's very much what you have demonstrated in the course of those 10 years. I'm tempted to add one point, which is that you've managed to keep your public finance in order generally. I mean, apart from the 2007-2008 period, which was difficult for everyone, but other than that, you had solid management of your public finance, which must have played a role. That's my suggestion.
More questions? Let's see, no. Then before it's time to move on, I have a general question to the panelists, and I don't know the answer. I hope you know the answer. The issue is the following: how do we explain at the national level to various electorates that what is good for Europe in the world is good for you, and not only what is good for my country in Europe, which is a completely different perspective? And that is essentially what these various reports also kind of deal with and try to push.
The easiest answer, but a very difficult one to actually communicate and have a narrative around, is the counterfactuals. What if we hadn't been together? What if Lithuania had not been in the euro area using the euro for the last 10 years? But of course, it's really hard because counterfactuals does not convince very much. But I think if we can articulate it, it's at least one step in the direction of valuing and assessing and valuing the benefits of it all. Second, and then I'll stop, but in view of the threats that we have around us, the Europeans, wherever our sight go, we have to be strong ourselves, together. United we stand, and stronger. It's pretty obvious. I was myself utterly convinced that Europe was the destination and was the means when I was a trade minister, and when negotiating trade arrangements with the likes of the United States, China, India, as a single country, even if it's a big brick, as Remontis calls it, you don't weigh much of anything in the discussion. But if we are all together, 27 member states, or 20 in the case of the euro, then you talk.
Valdis.
Well, I think it's actually important to respond to the both questions. First, what is good for Europe? And clearly, many of our flagship projects like single market, like euro, like customs union, have helped all EU member states tremendously. And it's important for all EU member states that we do have a strong single market, that we do have strong euro, that we have a well-functioning customs union, and that helps us collectively also to withstand different global shocks and geopolitical tensions. For each country separately, it would have been much more difficult. And just to give one example from today's presentation, Governor Šimkus was showing us interest rate developments over the last 20 years or so, where we saw this huge spike in 2009. We didn't, and there were similar spikes in other countries, as the Baltic states. Latvia was cut off financial markets altogether, as we know. We didn't have anything like this now following, for example, Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And part of the reasons why we didn't have it was the euro. So we were part of the larger currency, and interest rate increases in Baltic states were actually lower than in Poland and Hungary. And that's exactly because of euro. So it's to our collective benefit. But then obviously, like in every large project, you still need to be able to answer also the specific question. So what's in it for me? So what is specifically good for that project, for Lithuania, for Latvia? And I think this also has to be part of the answer.
Yep.
Starting from this last idea, I think, yes, it is crucially important that the political elite, not only government, not only members of the parliament, but political elite as a whole learns how to speak, how to talk to the electorate, how to communicate in the society. I don't say with the society, in the society, because political elite is also part of the society. We are all people, we are all members of that society. On the other hand, Stefan, I'm not sure, it's my feeling, I don't have statistical data, but it is my feeling that quite in many cases, you don't need to explain people that what is good for Europe is good for them, because they already know that. And a good example is Euro adoption in Lithuania, as I mentioned. The feeling of better security was one of the drivers why this Euro project, absolutely coming from, I don't know, from the other countries where many people have never been in their lives, was so warmly greeted in my country.
With those words, thank you for the wisdom based on years and years of policy experience among the panelists. Thank you.
The next session will be organized in two languages, Lithuanian and Ukrainian. Therefore, simultaneous translation will be provided, but please stay in your places. Headsets would be brought to your place. And now it is my privilege to introduce to you the second session, which is called Resilience Through Adversity, Lessons from History and Leadership in Geopolitical Crisis. The resilience of nations is tested to its core, and there is no clearer example in today's world than what's happening in Ukraine today. The full-scale invasion of Russia is not only an immense human tragedy, but also delivered an unprecedented economic shock with ripple effects across the world. Despite these challenges, Ukraine's economy and institutions are standing firm. They demonstrated an unprecedented and remarkable resilience. This session will provide an opportunity for you to learn how Ukraine has managed to stabilize its macroeconomic environment and sustain critical institutions, and also laid the ground for long-term recovery. Throughout this conversation that you're going to face between chairman of Lietuvos Bankas, Gediminas Šimkus, and governor of National Bank of Ukraine, Andriy Pishny, we will recover the lessons from leadership, foresight, and innovation in crisis. How can Ukraine's extraordinary response inspire resilience in other economies? And what does this teach us about the interaction of leadership, history, and strategy during very tough geopolitical crisis? So it is my great honor to invite to the floor the chairman of Bank of Lithuania, Gediminas Šimkus, and governor of National Bank of Ukraine, Andriy Pishny.
Dear colleagues, dear Andriy, to start, I would like to once again to welcome you and your colleagues in Vilnius in Lithuania. And from my own experience traveling to Kiev this summer, I know that this journey was long and not that easy. So sincerely, thanks for accepting the invitation. And I'm also very proud that not only our institution, Lietuvos bankas and Nacionalinį banką Ukrainie, but also us personally, we built close relations. So if you don't mind, during this panel, I will call you by name. Okay. As it was mentioned, we're going to discuss some experiences in very harsh geopolitical environment of Ukrainian institution, Ukrainian central bank, and but to set the scene, I'll start with some reflections of the economic development. Very short, very brief reflection of economic developments in the world or in Europe. So I may start with 15 years ago. Global financial crisis. This was called once in a century event. But even without that, over the last 5 years, we had a sequence of those tails events, such as COVID-19 pandemics, full-scale war on European soil, that is Russia's unjustified invasion into Ukraine, sharp increase in energy and raw material prices, spike of inflation. So what's next? Is there something next? And how should institutions react to this? But here I would say it shouldn't matter that much. And I would allude to what Madam President Christine Lagarde said. We need to be prepared. And here I would also cite, I want to cite what you have said in the beginning of this year, Andriy. You said that in crisis, we are not rising to the level of the opportunities, but we are falling to the level of preparedness. And the preparedness ultimately determines the ability to fulfill the mandate. And this point directly leads me to the second point. So we cannot guess what the next situation is going to be. It can evolve in the most unpredictable way, but we need to be prepared, and we need to be agile in our approaches, or to have agile approach to our toolkits. And this is what institutions quite vividly showed over the last 5 years. And third point that I would like to share is very much related with Stefan Engwas in the panel before. It's about communication, because we institutions, we are not functioning in a vacuum. We work for citizens. Therefore, clear, timely, and open communication is the essence to explain why we need to take one or another decision. But having said all this, achievements of the Central Bank of Ukraine are remarkable. And there are, I don't know if there is any, but if there is, so there are just quite a few central banks in the world, in the history, which were able to deliver price stability under conditions of a full-scale military attack. So, Andriy, if you could share the challenges your bank and you as a governor you encounter when delivering the primary target of the primary goal of your objective of your institution.
Я почну зі слів подяки, Гедеміне, вам за запрошення, вашій команді за цей чудовий прийом, за можливість бути сьогодні в цій історичній залі і говорити про український досвід. Сьогодні, ви знаєте, мені дуже зрезонувала аналогія, яку я декілька разів почув на попередній панелі, про те, що Європейський Союз – це дім. Це дуже близько українцям, тому що ми захищаємо свій дім. Ми робимо усе для того, щоб цей дім був в безпеці, щоб в ньому було комфортно, настільки, наскільки це можливо, попри ризики і виклики, які несе з собою війна. Сьогодні 1027-й день війни. Банківська система України за цю війну, а у нас є декілька вимірів війни. Велика війна почалася 24 лютого 2022 року, хоча насправді війна триває починаючи з 2014 року, коли росіяни анексували Крим. І коли ми кажемо про те, що велика війна триває 1027 днів, мені приємно і дуже гордісно думати про те, що українська банківська система протягом цих 1027 днів на жодну хвилину не зупинила своє функціонування. Це, напевно, перша війна, коли можна було спокійно розраховуватися карткою, Apple Pay, Google Pay, функціонували абсолютно всі, без винятку, системи. Так, у них були особливості, і ми про них, можливо, поговоримо, тому що в момент повномасштабного вторгнення Національний банк застосував дуже масштабний антикризовий пакет. Я не вперше про це говорю, тому що зараз цей досвід багатьох цікавить, адже усвідомлення війни і ризиків, які вона з собою несе, особливо для керівників центральних банків, це нова реальність взагалі. Ми навіть відкрили окремий напрямок технічної допомоги, де намагаємося поділитися цим досвідом, який є у українців, адже він нам дається дуже дорогою ціною. Це антикризовий пакет для того, щоб зрозуміти, що це було і наскільки значимим він є, я часто порівнюю із турнікетом. Турнікет – це засіб, який використовують в тактичній медицині в той момент, коли ваш організм зазнав критичної втрати. Він потрібен для того, щоб припинити кровотечу, для того, щоб затягнути місце рани, для того, щоб потім лікарі починали діяти і рятувати вам життя. І ось Національний банк 24.02.2022 року, коли нам небо на голову російськими ракетами впало, застосував цей турнікет. Адже втрати української економіки були катастрофічними. 20% території було окуповано. Україна за перший рік війни констатувала, що втратила 30% валового внутрішнього продукту. Внутрішня міграція, зовнішня міграція за своїми обсягами були безпрецедентні. Європа нічого і світ не знали подібного з часів Другої світової війни. Майже 17 мільйонів українців стали мігрантами. Значна частина з них виїхала з країни. Це був колапс логістичних каналів. Це була дуже, навіть важко передати, яка складна була ситуація психологічна. Через це ту фразу, яку ви згадали про те, що в кризовій ситуації ми не піднімаємося до рівня наших очікувань, а опускаємося до рівня нашої підготовки, ми прожили. Це наш досвід. Перше, насправді, цю фразу я почув у морських піхотинців Сполучених Штатів, адже саме так вони визначають для себе пріоритет своєї діяльності. Ви повинні бути готові до будь-якої ситуації. І ви повинні максимально прораховувати, брати до уваги. Так, будуть речі, які ви не зможете взяти до уваги і прорахувати. Але те, що ви вже підготувались, дає вам більше шансів на виживання. І от 24 лютого антикризовий пакет передбачав, що Україна відмовилася від усіх здобутків попередніх щонайменше 8 років. Ми до війни були в режимі гнучкого курсу. Ми змушені були зафіксувати курс. Ми були в режимі інфляційного таргетування. Ми змушені були відмовитися від режиму інфляційного таргетування. Україна змушена була застосувати безпрецедентні заходи, які обмежили рух капіталу. Були задіяні відповідні протоколи безперебійної роботи. Наклавши цей антикризовий турнікет, наступним викликом для України було те, щоб не перетримати його занадто довго, адже будь-які антикризові заходи, будь-який турнікет має обмежений термін дії. Якщо він занадто довго перекриває ваші судини, в цей момент починаються незворотні процеси. Його треба встигнути зняти. І цей момент повинні були знайти в Національному банку якнайкраще. Ще був один виклик. Економічні агенти населення після першого шоку війни почали поступово відновлювати економічну логіку ухвалення рішень. Український бізнес почав демонструвати безпрецедентну адаптивність. Урядові інститути згрупувались, і весь світ побачив стійкість і ефективність, і здатність до супротиву. І так поступово почалося відновлення, або ми це називаємо повернення до нормальності. Це дуже складний шлях, він небезпечний, він вимагає від команди Національного банку дуже глибоких і точних налаштувань і калібрування. Адже ми дотепер потерпаємо від війни. Українська економіка не відновилась. Минулий рік дав нам відновлення 5%, цього року очікуємо 4%, але ми втратили 30%. За кордоном залишається ще 7 мільйонів українців. Ми критично залежні від фінансової допомоги наших партнерів, як фінансової, так і військової. Щоб завершити цю частину, я можу говорити про це годинами. І ви знаєте, я хочу говорити з колегами з центральних банків про це годинами. Я хочу поділитися з вами цим досвідом. Війна набагато ближче, ніж вам може здатися сьогодні. Вона на нашій території, але на ваших кордонах. Тому що ми з вами сусіди в Європейському домі. Вас захищає стіна НАТО, вас захищає стіна євро, вас захищає і спільний ринок. Ми хочемо туди. Але сьогодні війна триває на нашій території, і ви вже потерпаєте від її наслідків. Через це скористайтеся нашою пропозицією, отримайте ту інформацію і досвід, який у нас є. Наша команда відкрита для того, щоб поділитися з вами системою наших протоколів безперебійної діяльності. Лише цей тиждень, а це був монетарний тиждень для Національного банку України, коли ми ухвалювали відповідні рішення щодо ставки. Протягом монетарного тижня ми застосували двічі посилені протоколи безпеки, не зупиняючи при цьому функціонування Національного банку і процедуру розгляду відповідних рішень, обговорень, засідання монетарного комітету, правління, прес-брифінги. Але це відбувалося вже в умовах посиленого протоколу безпеки. Адже відбувались ракетні атаки, відбувались атаки бойовими дронами. Але ми свою місію повинні виконувати за будь-яких умов. І, до речі, це фактично цитата з оновленої стратегії Національного банку. Цінова фінансова стабільність як запорука економічному відновленню. Але ми дописали одну фразу, і ми її дописали в травні 23-го року, і це було усвідомлене рішення. Обидва наші ключові мандати ми реалізуємо за будь-яких умов. А це означає, що війна з її невизначеністю може перенести нові, більш складні сценарії. За період цієї війни ми декілька разів опинялися в ситуації, коли та невизначеність, зону якої ми намагаємося скоротити нашими рішеннями, навпаки розширювалися через те, що росіяни почали нищити нашу енергетику. Це принесло відповідні додаткові виклики. Через це наш досвід, він є цінним для вас. Я нещодавно був в Швеції, Ерік Тедеян, перший голова Центрального банку, який зацікавився цим питанням, і ми 2 дні дуже добре попрацювали над цим. Беріть і користуйтеся нашим досвідом. Я тут в колі не лише партнерів, але й друзів. І я це відчуваю, Генемінес, і дякую вам за це.
Thank you very much, and thank you for sharing. When you listen to that, it's simply surreal. It's frightening, and of course, the losses were enormous. I won't give you numbers, but I will cite well-known Ukrainian economist Yuri Gorodnichenko, who said that the shock that Ukraine experienced in 2022 was equivalent to the Great Depression happening in several months. So losses are enormous, but what is the economic situation now? I know that you've taken a monetary policy decision, so could you explain what the economic situation is now?
Я декілька разів дякую вам за це питання. Декілька разів протягом сьогоднішнього дня, коли обговорювалися під час панелі проблематика Європейського Союзу, так чи інакше чув питання, пов'язані з Україною, і звучало, що нам вдалося втримати макроекономічну ситуацію. Ви знаєте, мені приємно чути, що ми говоримо це в доконаній формі. Хоча насправді це процес і ця вправа тривають щодня. Адже кожного разу з'являються нові виклики, нові невизначеності, які так чи інакше вимагають від України відповідних рішень. Сьогодні стан української економіки, вона залишається ураженою війною, вона себе не відновила. За межами України залишаються 7 мільйонів українців, ми відчуваємо тиск, пов'язаний з достатньо складною ситуацією на ринку праці, відбувається мобілізація. Росіяни продовжують нищити нашу енергетику. Якщо в 2022 році вони нищили систему, яка забезпечувала передачу електроенергії, то зараз вони почали нищити, не зараз, а в березні місяці вони цілеспрямовано почали нищити виробництво електроенергії. До певної міри це визнання того, що вони зрозуміли, що захопити нас не вдасться. Адже вони розраховували, скоріш за все, захопити наше виробництво електроенергії. А зараз зрозуміли, що ні. Але так чи інакше, ми кожного разу знаходимо якісь рішення, уряд, Національний банк взаємодіють. Тут я хочу віддати належне пані Лагард. Я дуже добре пам'ятаю, як перші свої дні на посаді. Це був дуже емоційний для мене момент. І мені потрапило до рук ваше інтерв'ю, в якому ви сказали про те, що монетарна і фіскальна влада зобов'язані взаємодіяти перед обличчям нових викликів. Так, мандати повинні бути чітко окреслені, але взаємодія життєво важлива і необхідна. Це мене дуже надихнуло, і це по великому рахунку дозволило нам перебудувати взаємодію з Міністерством фінансів. Ця взаємодія дозволила відновити ринок внутрішнього боргу. Україна в перший рік війни змушена була вдатися до емісійного фінансування оборонного бюджету. Рівень нашої взаємодії з Міністерством фінансів, а також підтримка наших міжнародних партнерів, Європейського Союзу, Міжнародного валютного фонду дозволили Україні протягом 2023 і 2024 року, а вони були дуже складні, не застосовувати монетизацію бюджетного дефіциту. Ринок внутрішнього боргу працює. покриває нашу потребу. Наша взаємодія з міжнародними партнерами дає нам можливість створювати джерела покриття нашого дефіциту. Разом із тим, ми реалізуємо з огляду на те, що наша взаємодія з міжнародними партнерами супроводжується великою кількістю зобов'язань в Україні, напевно, найбільш масштабний за всю історію моєї батьківщини план реформ. Я не знаю жодної сфери українського життя, яка би зараз не перебувала в стадії глибокої структурної реформи. Юстиція, антикорупція, пенсійне забезпечення, податкова система, митна справа, цифровізація – все одночасно прийшло в рух. І Україна в цих питаннях виконує взяті на себе зобов'язання. І це дає нам можливість говорити міжнародним партнерам з рівною спиною про те, що перед нами також зобов'язання потрібно виконувати. Я про ці речі кажу, тому що це важлива компонента з нашої макрофінансової стабільності. Ми дуже добре розуміємо, за рахунок чого і за рахунок яких джерел вона забезпечується, ця макрофінансова стабільність. Ми критично залежні від міжнародної підтримки. І ця міжнародна підтримка надається Україні взамін реформ, які проходять в Україні. Ми розпочали нашу взаємодію з МВФ з моніторингової програми. Це відбулося через тиждень після мого призначення. Я одразу сів і поїхав у відрядження, запрацювала місія МВФ. Через 2 тижні у нас з'явилась моніторингова програма, через місяць вона була визнана успішною, ще через 3 місяці у нас відкрилась програма розширеного фінансування з МВФ, яка стала, по суті, замковим каменем, на якому тримається уся система міжнародної фінансової підтримки України. Адже моніторингова програма чітко визначила спроможність українського уряду, Національного банку і української держави і потребу. І міжнародні партнери сказали, ми цю потребу готові покрити за умови, якщо ви виконуватимете ось такі плани реформ. І ми рухаємося в цьому напрямку. Тому що ми хочемо, насправді, бути частиною того європейського дому, про який сьогодні так багато говорили.
Thank you. Let us give a chance to audience to ask a question to Ukrainian Central Bank Governor. Do you have? Okay, while people, oh, is there? Okay, so if there is none, but still, in all this disastrous situation, there are people lives and people are living. So if I may ask you a little bit on a personal level, so you are governor of the Central Bank of Ukraine. What's your typical day?
Я зайшов до кабінету голови Національного банку 7 жовтня 2022 року. Одразу після голосування в українському парламенті. Знаєте, в мене за цей час складається враження, що я живу і працюю один довгий робочий день. Під час цього довгого робочого дню відбулися неймовірні події. Я декілька разів був у Вашингтоні, я познайомився з абсолютно неймовірними, потужними людьми. Ми були ефективні в домовленостях щодо надання Україні міжнародної підтримки. Протягом цього величезного, довжелезного робочого дня я декілька разів проходив через «це неможливо, давайте подумаємо і гаразд, ми це зробимо». Це відбувалося часто, і це означає, що ми прогресуємо, коли ми, як українська команда, пропонуємо, бачимо підтримку, шукаємо відповідні рішення з європейськими партнерами. Протягом цього величезного робочого дня я декілька разів був неймовірно щасливою людиною. Ви не уявляєте, які емоції може викликати повідомлення про те, що європейські лідери домовилися на політичному рівні і знерухомлені російські активи можуть стати джерелом покриття нашої фінансової потреби. Для мене, як для голови Національного банку, це повідомлення означає, що ми скоротили зону невизначеності на 2025-й дуже важкий для моєї країни рік. А ще мені це повідомлення несе дуже важливу звістку про те, що наші партнери проявили сміливість і рішучість. А ще воно для мене несе повідомлення про те, що знерухомлені активи Російської Федерації вже поступово розглядаються як джерело, за рахунок якого росіяни зобов'язані будуть компенсувати завдані моїй країні збитки. Ця еволюція поглядів відбувається, адже Україна зазнала неймовірних людських втрат, неймовірних фінансових втрат. Лише на кінець 2023 року швидка оцінка Світового банку підтвердила, збитки яких зазнала Україна в розмірі щонайменше 500 мільярдів. І це не враховуючи тих збитків, яких зазнала Україна цього року. Людський вимір. Я був дуже щасливий, коли в Національний банк повернулись діти. Даруйте, але це емоція, якою я хочу з вами поділитися. В Україні часто вимикають світло. В Україні відбуваються тисячі, вже навіть не можу пригадати скільки, ми просто перестали їх рахувати, повітряних атак. Значна частина нашого персоналу – жінки. В той момент, коли дитина залишається вдома і лунає повітряна тривога, мамине серце терпне. Ми дозволили матерям брати, батькам брати дітей в Національний банк для того, щоб вони могли спокійно працювати тоді, коли це необхідно. У нас запрацювали дитячі кімнати. В одну з таких дитячих кімнат потрапила пані Георгієва, коли була в лютому 2023 року в Національному банку, зайшла туди, там діти сидять, граються, щось малюють. Вона попросила їх розказати віршики. Я вас запевняю, це була чиста імпровізація, але діти встали і заспівали український гімн. Плакала вона, плакав я, плакали всі, хто були поруч. Через це ми навчилися жити разом, ми навчилися відбудовувати наше життя, не віддаючи такі емоційні важливі моменти ворогу. Це, якщо хочете, такий наш особистий вимір. В Національному банку ми почали один з одним частіше спілкуватися. У нас є такий протокол прихисток, до прикладу. Він функціонує тоді, коли, не дай Боже, буде вимкнуте опалення або відсутність світла для того, щоб наші працівники могли взяти в Національний банк своїх батьків, дітей. І щоб вони були в безпеці разом з ними. У нас обладнані бомбосховища, де можна переночувати, де можна прожити декілька днів. Оце відчуття своєї захищеності є дуже важливим для того, щоб ми і далі були ефективними, ухвалюючи монетарні рішення, забезпечуючи фінансову стабільність за будь-яких умов. Ми не можемо схибити, адже я на початку сказав, що нам потрібно відновлювати нормальність, і пошук цієї нової нормальності в умовах війни кожного разу змушує команду Національного банку вдаватися до глибокого аналізу креативних рішень, усвідомлюючи вартість, не дай Боже, помилки, яку ми допустимо. І як засвідчують ці 1027 днів, ми не часто помилялися. Інфляція з 20...
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Сьогодні знову ж частина цього довгого робочого дня, який живу і проживаю я і мої колеги, які сьогодні тут, в тому числі зі мною. Я дуже радий, що я сьогодні цей день розділяю разом з вами і маю можливість поговорити, розповісти і ще раз запропонувати. Скористайтесь нашим досвідом. Наш досвід може бути корисний. Наш досвід якраз про те, що в критичній ситуації ви не піднімаєтеся до рівня своїх очікувань, а опускаєтеся до рівня своєї підготовки. Ми знаємо, що працює, а що ні. Ми знаємо, чому це працює. Наші симуляції перевірені вже на практиці. Наш проект Power Banking – це проект, який дозволяє функціонувати банківській мережі відділень за будь-яких умов, в умовах повного, тотального блекауту, відсутності зв'язку. У нас розроблена система відповідних протоколів. Ми можемо про це говорити годинами, не буду забирати час. Просто прийміть нашу пропозицію. Ми в Україні навчились дуже добре відрізняти протокол формальний від щирої людської емоції. І ми навчилися бути вдячні. Адже ми розуміємо, що в цій війні нам самим вистояти буде дуже і дуже важко. Ви нам потрібні, а ми потрібні вам.
Thank you. And I can tell you one thing is to read in papers or in internet. The other thing is to hear from the first lips what's the life there in Ukraine. And this room is full of EU, Lithuanian, and other foreign policy makers. This is my last question, Andrei. And if you could leave us with one message, the most important, what it would be?
Моє повідомлення насправді буде чітке. І воно незмінно залишається протягом цих 1000 днів і під час кожної зустрічі я його повторюю. Залишайте з нами. Залишайте з нами, тому що ми з вами однієї крові. У нас з вами одна система цінностей. Ми захищаємо ваші кордони. Війна на нашій території, але в європейському домі. Ми повинні в цій війні перемогти. Ця перемога буде не лише українців, ця перемога буде вашою. Вона зробить усіх нас сильнішими. І навпаки. Будь-яка поразка буде вашою поразкою і нашою поразкою. Через це моє повідомлення таке саме. Ви нам потрібні, а ми потрібні вам. І ми дуже дякуємо за ту підтримку, яку ви нам надаєте, за ті рішення, які ухвалюєте, за сміливість, яку проявляєте. Не зупиняйтесь, будь ласка. Нам потрібно зробити набагато більше.
Thank you. And I ask to give a standing applause to Ukrainian government. Thank you.
Thank you, Gediminas Šimkus and Andriy Pishne. And indeed, what's happening in Ukraine professional lives and personal as well. But now, food for thought is good, but food for stomach is even better sometimes when you're exhausted and you need some energy. So I'd like to invite you to the lunch, which is served downstairs, and we reconvene at 1:30 at the same auditorium here at the same room. So have a nice lunch.